Deep in the heart of the bayou, we are gathered here tonight. Now it's time for action, 'cause our lives are on the line. Tonight we'll do our very best to break through all the bureaucratic mess. The time has come tonight, 'cause it's bayou time. Show what Louisiana's all about.
All right, welcome to Bayou Time. Of course, we're here at the Terrebonne Parish Courthouse, where Judge Randy Bethancourt just ruled that the seizure of some computers in the case that we know now as Exposedat, well, he said that it was within his jurisdiction to issue a search warrant for those, and that it fell into the four corners of what search warrants are supposed to fall into. Terrebonne Parish Judge Randy Bethancourt ruled Friday that authorities can move ahead with the search of computers seized from the residence of a local Houma Police officer and his wife's home. The complaint in which the judge signed off on and the sheriff used to seize the computers was originally filed by local businessman Tony Alford. The complaint was a criminal defamation complaint. About 30 people, some involved, but mostly the curious, piled into Judge Bethancourt's courtroom to hear the arguments and the judge's ruling. In this case, District Attorney Joe Waits recused himself because he was one of those mentioned in the website and informed me today that he did not want to be the chief counsel in a case that involved him. In his argument, Attorney David Ordwin told Judge Randy Bethancourt that magistrating a search warrant should not be a rubber stamp. He said the judge made a mistake by granting this search warrant. Judge Bethancourt stated that he was well within the four corners of the search warrant and that, in his opinion, Mr. Alford was not in the same class of public figures, as would be the parish president Gordy Dove, Sheriff Jerry Larpenter, or District Attorney Joe Waits. The judge stated that others were written about that were not public figures.
What concerned me was that the judge kept asking questions about the other individuals who are named in the blog. The critical issue here is whether or not Tony Alford, in his complaint, and if the affidavit in the search warrant showed that there was probable cause to believe a crime had been committed as to Tony Alford. The questions about these other individuals are superfluous. But when the very statute that is relied upon in this search warrant is unconstitutional in these circumstances, how can you have probable cause?
I think that was a very important element. Whether the affidavit clearly said Mr. Alford was a public figure or not is irrelevant, because this was a matter of public affair. It was a public contract, as I argued. I disagree with the court's decision. You know, we'll find out what either the First Circuit or a federal court has to say about it, but ultimately we think we'll be successful. If you look at the history of the case law, I think it's been reported over and over again. Clearly this is a matter of public affairs, public issues that individuals should be able to comment on.
We caught up with the sheriff of Terrebonne Parish, Jerry Larpenter.
Judge Bethancourt, from what I understand, when our detective first met with him, he just didn't sign a search warrant. Judge Bethancourt's like all the other judges. They're precise as to what probable cause you have to bring, and I'm sure he was precise. It took him 24 hours to sign this search warrant, and I believe that he looked at the Supreme Court ruling and he found where justification was there for a defamation search. And I believe that he ruled correctly. You have other individuals out there that are in the private sector and possibly could ruin their business. And I don't think anybody has that right. When somebody say take away somebody's livelihood, like the other side was saying that we're trying to take away somebody's livelihood, it seems like the other side is trying to ruin Mr. Alford.
Attorney David Ordwin sees it another way.
I think primarily it's a freedom of speech, and then now we're faced with an issue of a Fourth Amendment right where you have somebody's house raided and their property taken without a probable cause being shown or established.
I think some other people are probably concerned because they're going to be exposed, and it's unfortunate. You know, social media, you know, it can get you in trouble. And I think we're going to prove some things that maybe somebody may have been involved in some other issues.
Attorney for the sheriff, Bill Dodd, says that the judge ruled that there was probable cause to issue a search warrant.
What he did, he looked at all the evidence that had been presented him to justify whether or not a search warrant should be issued at that particular point in time, just like all judges do. And he found that there was, quote, probable cause to issue that warrant. Now, we know probable cause doesn't necessarily mean that an arrest will follow, but what I think a lot of people are confused about at this point in time, there's not, quote, a suspect in terms of someone who may be arrested. This is an investigation. This is an ongoing investigation, and a search warrant is just part of a tool that will allow law enforcement to continue an investigation until there is determined whether or not there's probable cause to make an arrest. And at this point in time, Sheriff Larpenter, I think, made the right decision.
Another question arises out of what actually happens to police officer Wayne Anderson.
Well, there's two different issues going on here because obviously he's a civil service employee. As y'all know, he's been suspended with pay at this point in time, but he's entitled to a hearing within 60 days of that suspension, and that has not been set at this time, but I suspect it will be shortly.
The sheriff, on the other hand, was quick to point out that he felt like this was a one-sided story.
It's been a one-sided story. I like to tell the public the whole story when our investigation is over. Then we let the public know and let them decide who to believe in this investigation or let it run its course through the court system. So my thing is that it's a one-side story done not from local media, done from out-of-town media. So what I'm saying is that we never put out any information about anybody who we're investigating. It was done by their attorney. And I think you'll see something happen in the future that might prove our case, and I believe will prove our case.
There have been many questions in the community as to who actually is the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office looking at when it came to the seizures in the home of a police officer and his wife. Can you clarify that to maybe let people know what it is?
Well, I don't think either one of them is a target per se of a criminal charge at this point in time. As you know, a search warrant leads you to find other evidence that may very well say, okay, this person should be charged. In the modern world we live in today, okay, you got to remember Sullivan versus New York Times, the guarantee. We're talking about a half a century ago when these cases were written. If you were to stand up in front of the Supreme Court back then and say internet, Twitter, Facebook, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. So a lot has changed, and in order to try and determine whether there was evidence that would further this investigation, you had to get IP addresses legally, and it was done, and of course this IP address came back to this location. Now, whether they did something from that location or somebody else used their computer from that location, we don't even know what's on the computer at this time, but that's part of a search warrant.
Attorney Jerry Smitko says the fight will not end in Terrebonne Parish.
It'd be First Circuit, as well as we can certainly seek relief in federal court, which we intend to do.
I'm satisfied the way it turned out, and I'm satisfied that the Attorney General's taking it over. And all we want to do is get to the bottom of it, get to the truth, because I do believe it's defaming a lot of people, including me. So I'm hopefully that we can get to the bottom of it, and I think people are going to be surprised, or not be surprised, with the results.
But Bill Dodd told HTV News that in this case, that small window of malice and defamation against a public figure may have an opening.
There are certain parameters in which a person may say something about a public official that they can't say, okay? Which means then they would be liable for civil and criminal penalties.
Talking about malice.
Yeah, malice and acting in total disregard for the truth. It's a narrow window, but it's there. So if somebody tells you on television or whatever, you can't defame a public official, that's wrong. Right. It's a narrow window, but it's a possibility, and of course that's what this investigation is about.
And in the case of Tony Alford, Dodd says that because he is not at the same level of a public figure as the others mentioned and Exposedat, that he has less of a burden to prove.
They're not going to have the same hard standard to say they've been defamed if they had been defamed that a public official would. So
which is what the judge did. He really put Mr. Alford in a completely different category than he did the sheriff or the parish president.
That's correct. That's correct. And whether he falls in that regard, whether he can wear two different hats, that's for a court to decide. But then again, there are people that work that are not public officials that have been the sub. There was even some comments about a judge on that website.
Mr. Alford was a public figure and not as irrelevant because this was a matter of public affair. It was a public contract, as I argued. I disagree with the court's decision. You know, we'll find out what either the First Circuit or a federal court has to say about it.
And that's what we got here, a watchdog group with rabies and biting at anything. And it's really unfair for people who are concerned about what goes on in government. And I'm going to lay out, after this is over, I want to lay out my entire history of dealings with insurance. Because I don't have many insurance companies coming knocking down my doors to tell me that they're going to give me a better deal than what we're dealing with. And I deal with many different insurance companies.
With cameraman Jason Serenier, I'm Martin Folse from the Terrebonne Parish Courthouse. We'll have more on this story as it develops.